Hello my friends, and welcome back to another video. Before I get started, I want to make sure that everyone understands this is a major spoiler video for anyone that hasn't gotten through Endwalker yet. So if you haven't completed the main scenario of Endwalker, I would suggest coming back here another time, because I'm sure you'll have similar questions after you're done with that, and this video will likely try to serve as a bulwark for that. But for those of you that are listening that have finished the MSQ, let's get started. So, as the title suggests, we're asking ourselves, what's up with Dynamis? I've noticed that ever since Dynamis was introduced, a lot of people have been theory crafting, proposing their own ideas, foundations, and what else it may or may not be doing for ourselves and the universe. As researchers, I feel it's important that we break this down on a fundamental level and truly try to understand what may or may not be happening here. So, join me today, my friends, as we research and try to understand what is Dynamis. Before we get started on our research part of this video, I'm going to set two rules in place. 1. We will only use information about Dynamis that is introduced in the MSQ. This will keep our sample data more pure. And secondly, there's going to be no tinfoil hatting, not in this part at least. Unless the MSQ expressly states something about Dynamis, we can't take it as gospel, not yet at least. But we must remind ourselves that as researchers and lore nerds, it's okay to not know what's going on here. In fact, it's more exciting to not know exactly what Dynamis is and how it works yet, because that puts us in a state of experimentation. A new frontier of magic and power that has been unexplored, unsettled. It's free and willing to bestow its knowledge and power to those that are willing to research it. So, let's start by asking ourselves, what is Dynamis? There are a few things about Dynamis that are well established within the MSQ. Number 1, Dynamis, like Aether, makes up an ambient energy source that is throughout the universe. Now, extensive research into Dynamis was never concluded, not even during the time of the Ancients. At best, all they had were working theories. However, the most prevalent theory was that Dynamis made up about 2/3 of the universe, whereas Aether made up about 1/3 of the universe. So, for every 1 unit of Aether, there were 2 units of Dynamis, at least. But if there's so much more Dynamis in the universe, then why are all of our worlds and stars Aether-based? Well, the MSQ answers that as well, stating that pound for pound, Aether is stronger. So, even though Dynamis is more abundant in the universe, Aether is going to be more powerful despite that. And yet, instead of being some form of material energy, it's more of an emotional energy, reacting powerfully to strong emotional and spiritual influence when Aether isn't smothering it. Aether is the foundation of matter in our universe, so we can try to break this down into 2 camps. We will consider Aether to be the concrete foundation of energy in our universe. Meanwhile, Dynamis will be considered the abstract form of energy in our universe. The reason we're throwing Dynamis into the abstract category is, like I said earlier, even the ancients didn't know much about Dynamis. And in our modern age in the 7th Astral Era, the people of Thavnair had a working theory about Dynamis called Akasha, but since it was so abstract and nuanced, they couldn't really prove or disprove its existence, much less study it. Though we can only take what the alchemists of Thavnair say about Dynamis so far. While they do recognize the potential existence of Dynamis and how it affects us and our world, by their own confession, the alchemists have performed no formal research on the subject, which means they cannot prove or disprove any of their theories, and the MSQ openly discredits some of their long-standing ideas. For example, the alchemists of Thavnair will tell you that many scholars and intellectuals will confuse Aether and Dynamis for being the same thing. But in the same breath, they also theorized that Dynamis cannot be openly manipulated either, which Meteion proved to be extremely incorrect. Which is why we have to take the untested theories of Thavnair with a massive grain of salt. So, what does the MSQ leave us with? 1. Dynamis makes up more of the universe than Aether. 2. Dynamis is weaker than Aether. 3. Dynamis is so weak on its own that no one ever even knows about its existence. And 4. Because so few people even know it exists, little to no research has been done in it in any age. That doesn't leave us with much. While that does give us a decent foundation of trying to understand Dynamis as a whole, it doesn't give us a lot to work with. After all, even the great Emmet Selk didn't even know about the existence of Dynamis until Hermes told him. Now that we've gotten our empirical data out of the way, let's address how Dynamis may or may not have affected our history. So, we understand that Dynamis existed long before our star came into existence. This is true. The ancients did not know about Dynamis' existence, so it wasn't incorporated into their society on a grand scale. So, historically, Dynamis meant little to nothing to the ancients. And the people that were trying to research Dynamis were still in the experimental phases, i.e., creatures like Meteion. Since Meteion, who was an Enteleki, was completely separate from the civilization we know as the ancients, we can firmly say that the Echo is not affected by Dynamis in any way, shape, or form. So, historically, the ancients, their powers, the Echo, had nothing to do with Dynamis. The only creature known in their history to actually be able to interact with and manipulate Dynamis was Meteion. Now, let's move on to the point in history where Meteion leaves and starts to sing her song. This brings about the final days for the ancients, and Zodiark is summoned to try and rewrite the rules of the world so that the star won't be destroyed. Now, we understand that Zodiark rewrote the rules of our world to prevent the final days, but what exactly those rules were, we don't exactly have written down and we can't observe them. We can assume it meant that there was a protective barrier around our world preventing foreign Dynamis from affecting us. That of course wouldn't stop the Dynamis that's still part of our world, but you get the idea. But, as you all know, the sundering occurred and then the world was scattered. Now that the world and everyone on it are sundered, we are 1/14 the strength that we once were. In terms of Aether. The fact that our existence was reduced that significantly suggests that Dynamis now had an opportunity to interact with us on a fundamental level, now that Aether, the more powerful element, wasn't overbearing and in the way. However, even though that technically would be the case as far as the MSQ is concerned, there's nowhere in history that suggests anyone even used or interacted with Dynamis. The first astral era was full of medieval knights and rudimentary castles. The second astral era showed the re-emergence of magical prowess and spells and abilities. The third astral era saw the rise and fall of the Allagan Empire, and even with their advanced technology, even they had zero records of Dynamis, as far as we know. The fourth astral era was a time of great regression, so again, no interaction with Dynamis on any record. The fifth astral era was the time of black and white mages, and then the War of the Magi. Again, no mention of Dynamis in any way, shape, or form. And then we move on to the sixth astral era. Most of our city-states end up being created, and that finally leads us into the seventh astral era, and again, no mention of Dynamis outside of one interaction with the people of Thavnair. So until a new record on Dynamis suddenly pops out of nowhere, it has had little to no effect on our world or its history since the Sundering. That's not to say that it might not have played a small part in something, but it would suggest that the part it played was so small, so minuscule, that no one even noticed. Even so, this is reinforced by what we're told about Dynamis in the 7th Astral Era. The fact that they had a working theory that it existed, but nothing to prove that it did, much less it could be interacted with. So, does Dynamis mean anything to our star on a historical level? Well, from our current records, the answer would be no, because there's no definitive evidence that suggests that Dynamis had anything to do with the progression of our civilizations, city-states, or research. Which makes sense. We are still Aether-based life forms, and interacting with Aether is not only how we survive, it's how we improve as well. So it stands to reason that no one would go looking for a source of power that may or may not exist when they already have something concrete they can hold in their hand. But moving on, let's ask ourselves, how does Dynamis affect us? I see a lot of people got really excited theory crafting that jobs like Dark Knight and Warrior were in fact using Dynamis the whole time instead of Aether. But this would be an oversimplification. All jobs in our current era can be explained through Aether, and that research has been proven time and time again. The sudden knowledge and existence of Dynamis did not fundamentally change how these jobs and their powers operate fundamentally. Now, that's not to say that Dynamis has no effect on our jobs and abilities. There is a likelihood that it very well might. But again, if it is playing a role, it's such a small, minuscule role that no one can notice it. Or rather, no one has ever noticed it for hundreds, if not thousands of years. But to that extent, I would propose something entirely different. For a moment, my friends, I would like you to imagine the Dancer class. Anyone that's completed the job quests for Dancer understands that part of the reason they travel around the world is to lift people's spirits and encourage good tidings in their souls. The reason for this is a phenomena that causes individuals who are so awash with sorrow, guilt, or depravity that they start to quite literally dance themselves to death. Apparently, this dance of death is contagious, and if one person starts doing it, others around them might start doing so as well. As far as my research is concerned, this is the strongest evidence of Dynamis' existence in the first place. Something that's rooted in emotions that is contagious to people around it. That sounds like Dynamis to me. And the fact that the dancers came from Thavnair and the people of Razat Han are the ones that came up with the idea of Akasha in the first place, I think is a strange coincidence indeed. So, before we continue, let's recap what we just covered. 1. As the Warrior of Light, powers and abilities that you've been using up to this point, like the Echo, your job abilities, and Aether-based skills, are still just that. The sudden introduction of Dynamis had nothing to do with it, because as we've discussed, if it is playing a role, it's so small that you can't even notice it. And subsequently, Dynamis may have something to do with emotional shifts on a cultural level, as shown through the Dancer job quest. So, let's wrap up this brief examination of new research material by asking ourselves, what does Dynamis mean to us moving forward? Well, our civilization now has a better understanding of Dynamis and its existence than we've ever had. Even the ancients didn't understand Dynamis on intimately a level that we do. As the MSQ has stated, we are sundered beings, and as such, the parts of us that aren't completely ethereal anymore have the chance to bring in and manipulate Dynamis. So, we have raw ethereal power with the chance of combining the fluid and emotional abstract energy that is Dynamis. This is interesting, because it proposes that we can probably do things that the ancients themselves could only dream of. The tough part is that, as we've already established, Dynamis hasn't been researched thoroughly at all, so whether or not it can be interacted with and used as a reliable source of energy by us is still in the theoretical stage. And the reason I bring that up is because of this. Did you know I had an entire video on limit breaks ready to go? I was going to release it before Christmas to try and give you all 2 videos a week as I usually do, but I elected to take that video down before it could launch itself. And some of you will understand why. And that is because of the final boss, the End Singer. When the tank LB is initiated to survive the first party wipe, she remarks that Dynamis is in use. I knew that if I released my limit break video after that fight, I could already feel the comment section trying to set me on fire for not knowing what I'm talking about. But, as I've stated earlier, just because Dynamis is suddenly a thing now doesn't discredit all the research and abilities we've gained through Aether. While my video on limit breaks, how they work, what Aether they draw from, and the mechanics behind each of them would still be correct, I didn't want to have to try to explain myself to every single person who fought the End Singer. Not until I made a video like this, at least. Maybe I'll release the limit break video sometime in the future, maybe not. We'll see. We'll see how well this video does first. That being said though, while the Warrior of Light is 8 times rejoined because of Ardbert, the rest of the source is only 7 times rejoined. So, if anything, the Warrior of Light has the least amount of affinity for Dynamis than anyone else. But since the Warrior of Light has more Aether to play with than anyone else in the source, that does leave their base power level much higher than everyone else's. But shelving the Warrior of Light for a moment, I want everyone to consider what it means for the shards. If they're only 1/14 the Aether of what they're supposed to be, that means that if the shards learn about the existence of Dynamis and how to control it, they have the greatest affinity for it than the source itself. If the shards themselves choose to use Dynamis over Aether because of how sundered they are, they have the chance to become just as strong as the source through another form of power. In theory, that would explain why Ranjit was so strong compared to us, despite the fact that he should have been weaker. The Warrior of Light, having been 7 times rejoined already, should have been able to wipe the floor with everyone on the first, regardless of how seasoned they were, but that wasn't the case at all. Ranjit was able to stand toe-to-toe with the Warrior of Light. And while Ranjit might not have had as much Aether, Dynamis may have been making up the difference. Now that is just a theory, but it's a working theory based off of what we've learned from the MSQ so far. I don't know about all of you, but I'm excited to see how Dynamis might interact with and change our opinion of our abilities in the future. While we are still ethereal-based life forms, which means that all of our skills and abilities are going to be rooted in Aether in some way, shape, or form, imagine how Dynamis might be able to augment or improve what we already have on a fundamental level. The strength and weight of Aether combined with the fluidity of Dynamis. Like the Endsinger fight suggests, that is the power of a limit break. To draw upon the Aether of the battlefield only to shape it and mold it with Dynamis into something that is overwhelmingly strong. But until we learn more, it's all going to be speculation and theory crafting. And I feel like I've theory crafted enough in this video. So, I thank you all for joining me for this little research session I put together for us. Leave whatever fun theories you have about Dynamis in the future down in the comment section below. And, until we speak again, stay safe, my friends. Hello everyone! Thanks for staying to the end of the lesson. If you enjoyed this and want to see more, subscribe and like this video to let me know I'm doing well. If there is a topic you'd want me to cover in the future, leave a comment about it and I'll see what I can do. Until next we meet, I'll be researching even more of our world's rich lore to share with you. Till then, stay safe, my friends.